Hi, how is everybody?
Well, nice to see
Hi,
you,
how you
Janet.
doing?
Oh,
You're all so
um,
quiet. You should be like going crazy, but that's all right. How you doing?
We all got voted out of
it's
the game, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
well,
it's nice to see you again, Janet.
I know. It's good to see you. I hope you're doing well.
I got angry last night, but I had to be. But
Yeah,
sometimes you have to be emotional. And I played with my
yeah,
friend. I played by like as myself, like you told me to, and
yep.
I literally just
It,
Final five. I was Rupert.
so I thought I would start
Yeah.
our conversation today by asking Janet, what do you think makes a good jury member at the end of these games?
A good jury member is somebody that's going to be able to take their personal biases and anger and frustration out of the thing. Hey, you know what? Some of the villains have done some very good gameplay. We may not like it, but sometimes that's the way it's got to go. Same thing, you got to admire it. You got to say it worked for them. Some people that, play a different role, whatever role you play, it may not be your way of playing, but as a jury member, you've got to learn to open up and embrace another style. What was good about it? What was bad about it? They got there. How did they get there?
Absolutely. Did you mentioned before like overcoming your anger and bias? In your vote, did you have to overcome any anger? Were you angry at Tommy at the final tribal council?
Yes, I was very upset. I was probably more sad with Tommy than angry. Um, and then I became angry when I found out some things. But the bottom line is, he did a really good job in befriending everybody, in making everybody feel that he was there to talk to. Pissed me off, smack him about it, but it really worked, and it was right. And
I'll wear a miniskirt any time of the day.
there you go.
There you go. So in figuring out like in sussing out different styles of gameplay and figuring out what you value as a jury member, what do you think makes a good question, a good in the final tribal council or the final ascent like we have here?
You need to think like explain their gameplay, and why do they not only explain it, because everybody's going to say, I wanted to be social, or I wanted to do this, or I wanted to be sneaky, or I wanted to make as many alliances as I could. Everybody's going to say that, but then have them say, and how did it work for you? Give me one specific example that your gameplay, if it was aggressive, it was social, or whatever, worked for you in the game. How did it benefit you? We took the personal attributes. Like Nora kept saying, this is my true self. So I laid out, okay, was it your true self when you were backdooring this person, or you were taking, you know, Dean's shoes and throwing them and hanging them off the sign? Was that your true self? So you're telling me, so I would need to think about each individual person and what I could make them trying to explain something they did in the game. Am I being
Right.
clear, or am I being confusing?
No, I'm literally
Yeah.
taking actual notes right now. So I completely understand what you're saying. Like yeah.
What I took away from that, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, Janet, is that you uh, you took every player on their own merits, and you understood the narrative that each player was presenting and questioned them on that narrative, and didn't try to project your own version of events onto their game.
That is exactly what I'm trying to say. You've got to try and look at it through their eyes, and how they wanted to approach the game.
Right. So Janet, how do you how did you overcome the feelings that you had about the way that Tommy had treated you in the game and things that had come out since? What was some of your mindset around that issue?
Going into jury, I'm assuming you're talking about.
Yeah, going into jury and then going into the voting booth at the end, because there are a number of players here who have been hurt by people who are still in the game and may be forced to vote for somebody who they're very angry with, but don't want to because fuck that guy or girl. You know what I mean? So how did you get yourself to a place where you were willing to crown Tommy even though he had done something that was very personally hurtful?
Done me wrong.
Yes.
I needed to take a step back, and I needed to think about, if I was up there, how people would be looking at me and the things they could pick apart on me, and then the things that I would defend and how I would defend it, and realize that at that point, we've switched the game. The game is no more about emotions. The game is about strictly gameplay and how did you do your gameplay. So the emotions have got to switch off. If you want to honor the game that you're in right now, you owe it to the game and the people in the game, that's all of you and the people still in the game, to now switch your emotions off and look at it logically. For us, all of us in the jury prior to going to the final jury, we all said that. We honored the game of Survivor too much to be an emotional person and let that influence us. We needed to step back. We all said that.
Right.
Everybody went back. We took a breath. Think about, the things I wanted to evaluate them on, outwit, all that stuff. You need to think about that. Emotions should be gone now because you played this game. There's a lot of time, energy, and emotions that you have put into this game as well as everybody else. And you deserve to give it to the game to be a logical person and not an emotional person right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the last question I have for you is: was there anything about Final Tribal Council, whether it's how somebody voted or a specific answer, or really anything that surprised you?
Yeah, well, for me, when I confront my question for Dean, and this is why Dean almost had my vote. Dean lost my vote because I asked him, "Do you remember?" And I said, "On such and such a day when Tommy, you and I sat down by the fire and made a final 3 alliance," and he denied it. That was it.
Now, and
Something
you were
that was very intimate to us. He should have
right,
admitted it. He was still trying to play the salesman with all the other people, and he devalued my opinion.
right,
And once he
right,
devalued my opinion, he lost my vote.
right. Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. I want to open the floor, and before I do, just remember we wanna respect Janet's time. Try to keep it to 1 or 2 questions. Um, so we could just if we could do this by raise of hands, just to keep it from getting too chaotic. Does anybody have a question that they want to start off with?
I mean, I can start.
Yeah.
What if you're really, really, really hurt about the person that not only hurt you but hurt somebody else, and then
This is going to sound not mean, because that's not where it's coming from. It's not your concern or business what he did to other people. The only concern that you should have is what he did to you. And then we go back to what I was saying. You need to honor the game. Sometimes that might have been his mode of play. That might have been his villainous choice of play. I don't know.
I know, I obviously, like, on my season of Expedition Online, there were a number of people who were very personally upset with the person who ended up winning, but once they took a few steps back, were able to say, yeah, I dislike her, but she got me, and that's the game. So Are there any other questions for Janet, either about jury or about being on Survivor? Anything that comes to mind? Josh, you go ahead.
Example, tragic stories or tragic events in your life or your children, and like using that and weaponizing that in a way. Do you feel like that's out of bounds?
Can I give a little bit of context so
Yeah.
Janet can answer fully? Because I think what Joshy is responding to is a specific player in the game right now, and I'm trying to.
I'm gathering that, by the way.
Yes, has been continuously referencing issues in their real life and using it as justification for moves that they're making in the game. Jury,
Okay.
is that a fair characterization?
I think that's fair.
All right,
Okay,
I am going to address this.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is easy because this is what actually happens on Survivor. I was very angry with certain people. I want you to forget everything except Dan. Dan was a very rich and powerful man outside of the game, and so he could promise people things in the game that nobody else could deliver. You understand what I'm saying? Those things happen all the time on Survivor. People bring in their outside, and it infuriates me. But that's their style of game. Where I go is to the next step. Okay, if they're doing that and they're bringing their outside tragedies, it's like Johnny Fairplay bringing in his dead grandma, which wasn't true. All that stuff gets brought into the games. Here's what people need to do is, okay, I would never do that. It's horrible. I think it's the worst. Okay, so what am I going to do about it? Am I going to whine and cry, or am I going to come up with a plan that I'm going to take this and I'm going to use it? That's what I did on my season. I couldn't fight that kind of thing that was going on, so I took it and used it for my advantage. If somebody is doing that in your game, that's horrible. I would not play that way. Some other people think that's a great way to play.
Janet, I also think it's about your, as a jury member, I think it's also about what is your moral judgment? Like, how do you feel, and how do you feel that compares into the greater scheme of this game, and whether that's out of bounds for you or not. I understand what you're saying too. Like, I do respect the game for sure, but I think there's levels to it. That's all.
So I was actually going to follow up with Janet on that because I think that was actually a very interesting answer.
Thank you, Janet. Appreciate your thoughts.
So as a how do you engage with that as a jury member? So if somebody's doing something, is using a tactic that you find to be morally horrible, and so in your case, everything else aside, Dan was not sitting there. Yeah. How would you have chosen to engage with that had he been there? And how do you judge that in terms of your final vote?
I think I would also come up with a direct question to that person. Right. And I would directly say exactly what I was just saying. Okay, I feel you were using outside forces that were really morally objectionable to the game. Can you explain that to me? I think you need to directly point to that person, and you need to make them explain their negligible behavior and ask them in a game-related fashion, how did that X, Y, and Z benefit, or how do you feel like that was okay to bring into the game? Put them on the spot.
And jurors, you will have that opportunity. So I know that there have been results on the show that have been controversial, that were the result of jury members thinking that a certain player, even if they got me, even if they outplayed me, they took that too far, and I can't reward that. I know that was something that a number of players said about Russell Hantz, that yes, he was the strategic force, but he handled this in such a manner that I cannot possibly reward him for it. You know? But there have been other times, like in the case of Tony Vlachos, I would say, where he also maybe crossed some moral or ethical lines that the jury decided, you know what? That bothers me, but he got me. And I have no choice but to hand this to him. You know, so we've seen both on the history of the show. Are there any other questions for Janet while she's here? Kara, go ahead.
So you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but like thinking of the questions and like how the jury answers our questions, how much of that is like plays into picking a winner versus just us reflecting on their game? Like if they like don't own up to things they did and like things like that. If that makes sense.
No, it does. You have to decide what's important to you as a personal juror. Am I looking for somebody that, like when Dean lied, that was it. He broke my moral code there. So that was it. So you have to decide what, as a person, what your moral code is. And if you call them out on different stuff, then you evaluate their answer based on your moral code.
Janet, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Janet. Well, that was fun. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being so great to Janet. Thank you for everything in the game. We love that you're all in this community. And let's have a fun Final Four and then Final Ascent.